Welcome back. The new year is quickly approaching, and I've had a pretty good 2024 on my chess journey, especially as it pertains to puzzles. My puzzle rating on chess.com is the highest that it's ever been, and hopefully I can continue that through the new year. I think it is actually helping me to get better at chess. If you're new to my channel, I'm not a titled player or a chess coach, so I'm not here primarily to entertain or educate you, although I hope that you are sometimes entertained and perhaps learn something, but mainly I'm here to document me getting better at chess. I do use a checklist when trying to solve puzzles. Now, it's changed over the past couple of years, but currently I look at the material count because sometimes that's a clue as to what the solution of the puzzle will be. Then I look for some tactical motifs. I see how much danger I'm in from the opponent. That also can be a clue as to what my goal in the puzzle is going to be. Like if I'm about to get checkmated, that means, I have to checkmate them, that sort of thing. And I still look at checks, captures, and threats. Let's just go. Right now, my puzzle rating is 2463. Here, it looks like my opponent has just taken something. I'm assuming there was a rook there that had never moved. But let's look at the material count. I'm way down on material. My opponent has an extra rook because I just gave up mine. And it looks like I'm down on pawns too. I just have 5 pawns. My opponent has 7. I'm not in immediate danger of being checkmated, but it looks like it won't be too long before they're able to muster some pieces around here and checkmate me. So that's usually a clue that I'm looking at checkmate. But let's look at tactical motifs, which often is something like a fork, a pin, a skewer, a trapped piece, or a checkmating sequence. Now here I do notice a couple of things. Their bishop's undefended, their queen's undefended, and I also notice that my rook and queen are pointed directly at where their king is hiding. So for example, I could take this h-pawn and they can't take back because that pawn is pinned by my rook, and I would be threatening checkmate. And that is probably, the answer to the puzzle is probably something right in here. But let's look at my checks. My check is this rook capturing on g2, which I don't think is good because they would take back and I would have a follow-up check, but then they could just move out of check. If they moved out of check there, I could push this pawn and they would be in check again. Wait a minute. Well, let's see. If they take here and I put the queen here, they might want to go to the corner because that would be a check when I push this pawn. Okay. Well, what if I take here and they take and I push this pawn now, which is a check, and they couldn't move over. They would have to go to the corner, and then I would check here, and they would have to move. Wait a minute. Is it that? That seemed pretty complicated, but I'm going to follow this up because those are all very forcing moves. I'm going to sacrifice the rook on g1. Oh, it was that. Okay, well then it's probably this pawn and not this check, right? Because if I check with the queen now, they move over. But then I have this check. Let's see. I check with the queen now, they could drop back to h1, and then I don't have a follow-up check. So I think it's pushing the f-pawn to f3. Okay, they did go there. Now I still do have a check, but there they just take. So I think it's taking this pawn, threatening mate 2 different places. And I don't know what they can do about that. Wait, maybe the problem with this is that it's not a check. Maybe they can do something about it. What if I check here now? That's more forcing. But shouldn't this also result in a mate in 2? This is not a mate because they can move over, but then that's a forced mate. Let's make sure. They can't block this, right? They can't come up. They have to go over. So then I will have a mate down there on g2. I'm pretty sure. Okay. Well, that took a long time, and I'm glad I got it, but I need to know what went wrong with the other ideas that I didn't do. 2 different ideas. I just want to know. Okay, here after the opponent takes my rook, it's mate in 4, and that's the only one. Now I'm curious, what's wrong with this move? That's horrible because of bishop to d4. Oh, because they can check me with their bishop. And the way to delay that the longest is to play c5, which they'll just take en passant. Then I have to come over here, and then they check me, and then I have to come to one of these 2 squares, and then they check me again, and I have to come down, not there, I have to go to one of these 2 squares. Well, I didn't see that. So it's a good thing that I didn't try this method. That's because I didn't see that they could have checked me. Okay, now my other question was in the actual puzzle after I played here and they took and I pushed the pawn and they went back. What was wrong with this move? Is it the same problem? Is it the same problem that they can check me? I bet that's it. Yes, bishop to d4 check. Okay, so when we got here, I did the right thing by changing my plan because originally I had thought I had to take the h-pawn and then mate, but that's not a check. So it had to be checks all the way down. And then they only had the 1 legal move. Okay. That was the answer, is that it had to be checks on every turn. I wish I'd seen that from the beginning. Okay, that one was rated 2571. I'm happy that I got it. Next puzzle. Oh, we got an endgame puzzle. Well, I can't use my normal checklist on this one. I have a different checklist for endgame puzzles, but it's not really complete yet, and I'm not sure what all should be on it. A few things that I think I put on my endgame puzzles checklist was, are there any checkmates possible? And here there isn't yet. Another one was look out for the danger of stalemate, because a lot of times in these positions, especially if you have a queen or a rook on the board, their king is very limited as to where it can go, especially like, these pawns can't move. So you have to be careful. Like if I check here and they go there, do we end up in a stalemate or a draw? I think another thing was to try to count squares to see who wins pawn races. But I usually end up defaulting to the process of elimination. There are only so many possible moves in some of these, especially pawn-only puzzles. This pawn and this pawn, as we already said, cannot move. My f-pawn only has two choices. It can move forward to f5 or it can capture on g5. That's it. It's the only two moves that pawn can make. My king is also fairly limited. My king cannot go to any of those squares because of their pawn and pawn guarding them. So like my king only has three choices. It can go down to h7, g7, or f7. So I only have 5 possible moves, and I can just eliminate those, probably. I think we can eliminate the king moving backward because, number one, it doesn't make any sense. I need my king up as close to their end as possible and as close to defending my pawns as possible. If I move back, I think they're just going to take this pawn. And yes, I could take back, but then they move their king over, and I can't get to the 2 pawns that I need to get out of the way. And the same thing is probably true for these other squares. Now this pawn, if I move it forward, which was one of the options, they could take, and I'll take, but then they're going to move their king down beside this pawn, I think. Wait, is that it? If I play f5, I don't know that they will take, but they might be strongly encouraged to. They won't be able to come after it with their king. And if they don't take, I'm going to go past, and I'll have a protected passed pawn. Or take there, but then they could get to it. So I think they'll take. And if I take back, they don't want to move their g-pawn immediately because I could take there too. So they might have to spend time moving their king down to protect their g-pawn, and then I can go with my e-pawn. Then they go, and then I go, and they go, and I go, and they promote, and then I promote. Maybe that's not it. My first instinct was to take the pawn, and that's the only other move I haven't looked at yet. If I take there, that's a check, but I assume they would just move in front of my pawn, and then what do? Move over? Because if I move over, let's see, if I capture here, that's a check. I don't know where they'll go, but let's assume that they try to get in front of my pawn. Well, that means their king is guarding those 2 squares, f5 and h5, so I would not be able to move forward. Also, their pawn is guarding f5. And if I then move my king over here to f3, they can move their king around, and I can't go forward because their pawn is guarding f5. So if I take and they get in front of it, and I come over to h6, they can come through here, aiming for my undefended d-pawn. And yes, I could go around, and then they would have to go down, but then I push my pawn. They take, I push, and they push. Now this way I promote first, but I don't know if that's a win. Also, I don't know what they will do at each step of the way. If I take, and they move over. Let's say I play to h6, because again, I can't go forward with the king or the pawn, and they come in between. I wouldn't want to move my pawn then because they could take it on g4. So I'd have to move my king up, and then these 2 squares are covered, so they can't go back up, and they can't move their pawns, so they would have to move their king, so they would only have these 2 choices. They would probably pick e6, and then I move my pawn, and they can't catch it. They take my d-pawn. I move forward. Oh, they have to get out of the way of their d-pawn one way or another, and I move forward, and then they move their d-pawn, and then I promote, and they're still, okay, that's probably it then. And I go to h6 and h5, right? Because if I move the pawn now, they take it. So I have to move my king to h5. Also because that kept them from going back in front of it. Okay, well, now if I play this and they come toward it, I can outrun them because they can't get behind it or here. So I think I just move the pawn now and keep moving the pawn. Nothing else. Well, I can't move that pawn, and it doesn't make sense to move my king. Oh, wow. Okay, well, that took a while. But I think after the first move, everything else was automatic. At least to me, maybe not to everybody, but to me, after they play here, like what I was having trouble deciding between was moving forward or taking. But I think the problem with moving forward is that when they take and I take, they were going to come here. And as I said, they would win that pawn race. Oh, it says I should go down. That would be slightly better. But if I went down, they're just going to move their king down, and then I didn't help anything. And then I play this, and they're going to play this. And my best move is to come down with it, so I can guard the promotion square, and they're going to come down, and I'm going to go, and they're going to promote first. Well, that's why I wouldn't have brought my king down, because now they promote with check. But yeah, that's what I had to determine, is that they would win the pawn race if I went this way. So, and then the second thing was determining once they played here that I had to go to h6. But like I said, that made a lot more sense here in this position, because going to f6 doesn't make any sense at all. They're going to come around. Yeah, and it's going to end up drawn, because I'm going to be able to protect my rear pawn, and they're going to be able to keep me from getting to their rear pawn. So those 4 pawns would just be locked up. Okay. Wow. All right. Well, I'm averaging about 10 minutes per puzzle. Let's do another one and get a new high score, hopefully. Once again, let's do the material count. I'm slightly ahead on pieces because of the rook for the bishop. But again, I only have 5 pawns and my opponent has 7. How are my opponents getting to the end game with that many pawns? Okay, let me check how much danger I'm in. I'm not in a terrible lot of danger. They can check me, but I can get out of check. I don't think I'm in danger of being checkmated immediately. As for tactical motifs, their king is kind of cut off in here because my rook is cutting off their back rank. My pawn's in the way, so I can't check here, which would be kind of nice. If these 2 pawns were not here at all, I could check there. No, they would just block with the bishop. Never mind. It's not that, but I do have a check down here. But that's the only tactical motif, so-called, that I see right now, is that their king is kind of trapped in the corner. But when I check down there on F1, they're just going to squirt out here to F3, and then I can check in the corner, and they're just going to come out one of these 2 ways. And I don't know what I've gained. I don't see any other tactical motifs. Okay, but the other checks that I have, besides F1, is the rook to G1. But if I check on G1, I mean, they don't have to take it. They could just move over. But what if they did take it? Then I couldn't check down here, but I could follow with my queen. But then they would just get out of the... Right? If I check with the rook on G1 and they take, and I check with the queen, they just come back up here to G2, and I don't have anything. And if I check here, they just come out, but I don't have to check on H1. I could check on D1, then they come out, and I mate them with the pawn? Okay, well, I'm going to go to F1 then. Well, they went forward, so it's got to be back over here, right? Because we determined... Well, let me check. If I go to H1... Yeah, if I go to H1, they get out this way to the G file, and then I can't check them with the pawn. So I have to go to D1 to get them to go there, and then I think this is checkmate. Oh, wow. Okay, well, I did that one a little faster, but at the rate I've been going, I don't have time to do another one. Thank you for spending your time here. Let me know if you have any plans for chess in the new year, 2025. I think the only thing that I'm going to try to do in 2025 is to cut out entirely blitz games. I have been continuing to play blitz, but not as part of my chess development. I do it as kind of a relief valve, and I don't even think of it as chess because it's fast. You don't have time to think of your moves. And every now and then I use it to experiment with, opening variations. But usually I just do it for the fun, the adrenaline, and I'm not treating it as chess. But I still think it's probably not helping me. So I'm going to resolve to cut out blitz entirely in 2025. We'll see how long that lasts. Thank you for spending your time here. I'll see you next time.